Hello and welcome to the Life Together podcast, where we share in meaningful conversation about living for Christ and loving one another. Thanks for joining today, and we hope you enjoy this episode. All right, well, hey everyone. Today I'm here with Katie Birch, and Katie and Taylor have been with us for how long? I know Taylor grew up here, but how long have you been at Lost River?
Dating or officially? Let's see here. Sawyer's 7, so officially for me, been a member 8 years.
8 years, okay.
I was coming a lot earlier than that.
Yeah.
So.
And then now y'all are here with your two boys, Sawyer and Hawkins. And funny story, Sawyer was like one of the very first people that I met at Lost River. Now that's probably, for anyone who knows Sawyer, that's probably not that surprising. But the first Sunday I was here, I was walking out, I was greeting people outside because we still weren't allowed to like hang out in the foyer after church because that was during COVID. And so I'm standing outside, we're all masked and everything, and we're all, saying, greeting and saying bye to everyone as they leave services. And I'm getting to meet a lot of people. But one of the first people that I met that morning was Sawyer, and he just came like bouncing along right up to me. Hey, I'm Sawyer Birch. And anytime you're around Sawyer, it's like you can't help but like your face just kind of lights up with joy. He just brings like this joy and energy. And so I've always thought about that, how Sawyer was one of the very, very first people I met at Lost River. And I feel like just as a family, y'all have meant so much. I've only been here for 3 years, but like just the love and the hospitality that you've shown, you and Taylor both. I'm just really grateful for both of you and for your boys, Sawyer and Hawkins. Y'all mean a lot. And so
You're
thanks.
Gonna make me cry, Jarrett.
Well, thank you for joining today. I know we have like a lot of things that we want to talk about, and not necessarily a clear direction that we like want to take the conversation in. But I know that so much good is going to come from it. And so before we get into just kind of your journey as a family over the past couple years, just give us a brief update as far as the right here and now. How is life for the Birches?
Currently very crazy. Sawyer, our big fundraiser for Sawyer and trifunctional protein deficiency is October the 14th, and it's the race that you actually started. So in a group.
Yes,
that
was a
did.
Huge
there was
team
a group,
effort.
But
well, real quick on that, it was funny because we had, I didn't necessarily plan on talking about this, but since we're on the subject, it was funny. We at that time we were having a lot of devos, and for like the young adult college age group, and all of us, like you and Taylor were so good, I felt like, at connecting with that age group. And so I think we had a couple devos at y'all's house. And so, everyone had become, I feel like, pretty connected, in with Sawyer and Hawkins as well. And so when it was announced at church, the diagnosis, everyone really felt the weight of that. And so the next Devo, we were all just kind of like brainstorming, like, hey, what's something we could do? And it started with a car wash. Like that, we were like, okay, itty ideas, like, let's just try something. And then I can't remember who it was. It may have been, I think it was Mackenzie, or maybe Mackenzie and Briley both, who had the idea of like a race. And then we just tried to, put our best foot forward and try something. And I know that I was, the whole time I was so concerned that we were going to put like just extra unwanted pressure on y'all. And I sometimes still like worry about that, but I I love that now it's like each year it seems like it's grown, and now year
Right.
3, it's I would say much more
We're a
official.
legit
And
race
yeah,
now.
yeah. So that's
Not running in my neighborhood.
right. And I know that like just through the conversation that started that one night in the wherever we had the devotion that night has led to this, and has I mean, how many thousands of dollars has that raised for research at this point?
Let's see here. So far with our donations this year, we would be at almost, in our time, $250,000. And that's not including what was raised for us when insurance wasn't covering
Okay.
Sawyer's medicine, which was $10,000 every
Gotcha.
2 weeks. So
That's
was
crazy.
we were just overwhelmed with all of it. I mean, just it's like there was so much, we were just so humbled that people were so generous and wanting to help. And
Yeah.
it meant the world to us because we were just almost numb.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was just so much hitting us all at once. And so we were, I remember y'all coming to my house and suggesting it. We were sitting on the back deck, and
Yep.
I'll never forget y'all coming around because we were playing with the boys. And I
Yeah.
was just like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I remember thinking, oh no,
Yeah.
I don't think I can do this. But y'all were so great, and you did all of it. I just had to talk to people, and it was hard, and it's still hard talking to people, but
Mhm.
Sawyer's life is worth it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, that was actually, I've told people this, but that night was actually one of my favorite nights since I've moved here to Bowling Green. And then that's amazing to hear like what has come from that. And it definitely shows both, I think, the love and support that how loved y'all are, and the support that you have, and then also just the work that God is doing in this and the answered prayers. So I know as we're talking about this, I'm sure that there could be some people who are listening who are either new to Lost River or are not from Lost River, and they're like, what are y'all even talking about right
Who are
now?
these people?
Yeah, they're like picking up the pieces of the puzzle, trying to put it together. So we'll kind of I guess get back into that at some point, but so the race is coming up. That's why we
Yes.
brought that up. The race
Yes.
it's 2 weeks, right?
Yes.
Not this.
not October the 14th. So
Okay.
is that not this Saturday, but the
Two Saturdays.
Two
away.
Saturdays.
Yeah, yeah.
If
But
you can't tell, my brain's
Yeah.
not working because I'm like, what?
Yeah,
What
well,
am I
I'm-
doing?
I'm bad with dates, so I don't remember them very well. But okay, so yeah, 2 weeks, and if you have not signed up, that
Yeah.
would be, this is a great plug for that. And I'll probably plug it at the end as well. But we'll link the run sign up on
Awesome.
the podcast and everything.
And you can also like Google too, like run the Maple 5K, run sign up. And I think it should like pop up on Google as
Okay.
well. So
Okay.
just make sure it's the one that says
Yeah.
Kentucky and not
Right.
some random one.
Yeah, and also it doesn't have to be a run. Just to be clear, this is a
Yes.
very the past 2 years, it's been a very just go at your own pace, walk, slow walk, crawl. yeah. And then some people run it too, but anyway, it's
And this year,
time.
we've always kind of done in the past because, like you said, just the kindness of strangers from all over
Yeah.
that have helped us, and we have family and friends like that don't live here, and so having that virtual option,
Right.
and I mean, really, you could sign up for the virtual option, but you don't really have to do it. You'll still get the shirt, and the money's appreciated, obviously.
Yeah, but the Lord will know. No, I'm just kidding.
But God is
Yeah,
watching,
that's right.
and but yeah, this year for sure, I wanted to make sure that it was something like we have a kids run, and we have the 1 mile walk, and then we have the 5K, and so wanting to encompass everyone that we could.
Yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to that, and I totally understand why right now is a crazy time preparing for that. And if it's all right with you, like, let's just go back to that day or maybe that week and talk about what that initial experience was like, and then move us through what this journey has been like as a family.
Ironically, I guess I might kind of start before that and just say, because it kind of, so when Sawyer was born, you do these newborn screens that test genetics for things. And he scored for another metabolic disorder. Well, we essentially lived for a whole month like he had this metabolic disorder. And then we got the genetic testing back that said he wasn't even a carrier for this. And we couldn't believe it. We were like, oh my goodness. And through that month and a half that we had to live like this, I had to feed him every 2 hours. There was all this specialty stuff we were having to do. And being used, when I did pediatric nursing, I saw so many sick kids that, like, their families just, kids are so resilient that they lived in these terrible home situations. And so I just prayed, as devastated as I was, I, through my tears, thanked the Lord that they gave us this child, you know, because I knew that no matter what sickness, like, we would give him the best life we could, you know. And so that was very validating, I guess. When it came back, we were just amazed, like, he wasn't even a carrier of this, you know. We're like, what in the world? And that's so bizarre. And then we kind of started life, and then I started noticing things and started asking questions. And he kind of got to about the age of 2.5 and he would fall all the time. And I just thought, you know, I was like, get up, you know, good Lord gave you 2 legs, you know, I'm not going to hold you all the time. And it just got more and more obvious, like, him struggling to keep up, and he fell, and he would walk on his toes like a gorilla. And, like, now we know he can't feel his toes very well. And he got the flu, and he lost the ability to walk. And so there were all these things that kept coming out in my head, and that I had doctors, you know, kind of look at me like I was crazy. And I just went with my gut, and I'm glad I did. And when I had doctors that validated me, it was like, thank you, Lord. Like, I needed that, because it was kind of right when I'd be discouraged. And so fast forward to me finally just pushing, like, I want a full genetic panel done on him. And the doctor that did it, he essentially acted as if I was crazy, and he wanted to wait a whole nother year. Sawyer was in leg braces at this point. And I said, no, I'm not going to wait a year for him to have a muscle wasting disease, and he loses a whole year of muscle mass. And so that's when we got the finding out that he had the genetics for trifunctional protein deficiency. And ironically enough, I say all that to say, because I was actually on a girls' trip with girls that are members here that are some of my best friends. And I know that that's not anything but God, because we were having a fun time. We had gone to Disney World, and I was in the middle of the Peter Pan ride, and I saw that it was a Vanderbilt number calling me. And I said, I've got to get off. I've got to get off right now. And so I took the phone call, and I'm standing there, and I'm looking around, and it's this doctor, and I can't hear him very well, and it's loud, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to write all this down. Like, you know, this is it. This is the phone call. And so I'm looking at all these families. I'm like, they don't have a pen and paper. And so I see this guy like 15 feet from me, and of course a parade's going by. It's like all the trifecta of terrible sounds. And I was like, I need a pen and a paper, and I need it now. And so he got me a receipt and a Sharpie, and it was windy. And so he sat there and held it down on top of a trash can, and I was just taking notes of what it is. And as I was going through the conversation, I was crying and I was shaking, and he realized that this was a bad conversation. And so he started directing, you know, all these people, I need bottled water, I need more pen, papers. And so when I got off the phone, he was like, ma'am, I need you to calm down. What do you want to do? Do you need to get out? Do you need to make phone calls? And there's a lot of other details of the story that's just hilarious and comforting and amazing. But come to find out, he was the like second in command at Disney World. And I'm like, what are the odds of that being the person that could get me anywhere I needed to get at that moment? And he did. Like, I saw back ends of Disney World that y'all wouldn't even know existed. And and that I was there with some of my dearest friends. And we couldn't go to the doctor. It was a few days. Taylor told me, stay down there. You've got a couple more days of your girls trip. And he was like, you're just going to come home and cry. So he was like, enjoy your time. And so I don't think it's ironic that God gave me that news in what's supposed to be the happiest place on earth with some of my dearest friends. And so it was disorienting, like I would laugh, but the joy of social media and us just kind of vegging out. Within 4 hours of me getting that diagnosis, we were on Facebook, and I had already found a mom with a kid that has TFP. And when there are less than 100 worldwide, that's kind of a big deal. But I'm like, you put all my friends on this, and we found them and found whoever we could. And I was on Facebook groups and, asking questions. And I was just amazed that's. And so it was like I got home, and after that, it was just a whirlwind of doctor's appointments. And initially, the leading world specialist is in Pittsburgh, Dr. Vockley. And there's only like 3 in the world that treat TFP. Wow. And so when we first off, our checkup was at Vanderbilt before we went to see Dr. Vockley. And I was downplaying them. I was like, well, I'm not listening really to anything they say until I get to Vockley, because they don't know what they're talking about. They've never treated this. Well, come to find out, when we get there, their whole team had researched all of this. The doctor had actually trained underneath Dr. Vockley. Of all doctors in the whole U.S. to train under, she had trained with Dr. Vockley, and she had already cared for 2 patients that had something very similar to Sawyer. And so I was like, okay, you have my attention now, and they were just amazed, in pure Sawyer fashion. And God, like, they were preparing us for a heart transplant by the age of 6. And she called me the next morning from her personal cell phone, and she was like, his heart is fine. She said, I have no idea why, but his heart is okay and it's fine. And I'm like, wow, like there's just so many things that he's just denied the odds. And so it was a lot of ups and a lot of downs, a lot of just emotions all over the page, and things that you just randomly call friends and ask, that your mind's just going some weird way. And then it's like, okay, that's all I need. Yeah. And they're like, okay, bye. It was an absolute whirlwind. And amazingly, Taylor and I react differently, men and women, but our personalities are different in that. And I don't think it's, just ironic that times that Taylor was not doing well, I was okay-ish. and vice versa. And I know that that's not, and then there were times we were both not doing well. But for the most part, it really made us be like, I wouldn't want to be doing this with anyone else. Like, we're going to do this. And so here we are. Yeah. With that, with that week and weeks and diagnosis. And so.
Yeah. Wow. Well, what I hear in that is like the Lord providing for you over and over again, and kind of just the way that you express some of those things, like from the moment you found out, here you are, in the happiest place on earth, finding out this news, but surrounded by your closest friends and in contact with the the most important person that you could be connected with in that moment.
Right.
And then again, as you try to navigate your way through this just wave of information that hit you, all of a sudden you've got a whole army at your disposal
Right.
that the Lord has given you to go and figure these things out and get you connected with other people. And then the doctor getting in touch with the doctors at Pittsburgh, and then all along you and Taylor being able to do that together and realizing that God gave you one another for this. And then I guess overall that God blessed you with this amazing boy who's, according to the doctor, whose heart is fine.
Yeah.
And to know Sawyer, that's the biggest understatement ever. Sawyer's heart is amazing. So it's so encouraging just to hear God working through your story. There's a passage that I came across actually earlier today that reminded me of y'all, and it's Colossians 1 in verse 11, and it's when Paul, he prays from the day that we heard. And the way it hit me thinking about our conversation today was like the day when we heard like this news that Sawyer was diagnosed with TFP. We have not ceased to pray for you, for you to be strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, for all endurance and patience with joy. And I'm like, if that's not an answered prayer, like that's what I hear and see from y'all. And I know that so many people have shared that prayer. But I know that through all the prayers, that doesn't mean that every moment's been easy.
No.
And so as much as you're willing to share, what has that experience been like, just internally for you, or maybe for your family, however far out you want to extend that kind of inner circle? What have the highs and lows been like? What have been some of the funny moments where you could kind of like take a deep breath, and then what have been some of the moments where it's really hit y'all just how real this is, and how hard has that been for you and for your faith through all of this?
Phew. By no means has it been easy, and I struggle with it honestly every moment, every day. And I already saw a counselor before Sawyer's diagnosis, but I was mad. I was thankful and mad all at the same time. I'm thankful that this child was given to me, because I will do everything I can, to take care of him. And but I was and I knew that the Lord had already taken care of him. I mean, it was like a friend of ours said, God can handle it. Like, God's going to meet you where you're at. He knows that your baby has gotten this terrible diagnosis, and he knows that. And I tell you, it was almost like the Lord was wooing me back. Like, it was, multiple times a day, stuff would just happen. I would have a thought and a song would come on, or I would be upset and a text message would come through from someone random that I'm not even close to, just like, hey, just felt like I needed to pray for you right now, and I want you to know I'm doing that. And so it did get comical almost, where I was like, all right, Lord, I see you. Like, I'm still not happy with you right now, but I see you, and so it became, I kept a list on my phone, and then it ended up getting deleted, and I hate that it did, because there was just so many things that it could have not been anything but the Lord. And so that's it. Has, when I try and focus on those things, because my option is to suffocate in the floor every single day and sob and be mad, or I can have faith, or at least try to have faith. And basically, you know, I don't know why bad things happen. I don't know why bad things happen to good people. That's something I'd really like to know the answer to, you know, but at the same time, I know I'm not going to get that answer, and I'm not going to be able to make sense of it. And so my only way to be a good mom and is to focus on God and how much he's protected us thus far. And just realizing, like, with the knowledge I have today, Lord, with the knowledge of you, I don't understand, but I'm trying to serve you, and I'll try and use this outlet any way I can to glorify you and find that, you know, within you. And just Sawyer himself and even Hawkins, they just, things that they've just done for each other is just encouraging. Sawyer was wearing leg braces, and Hawkins, at like 18 months old, Sawyer could barely get off the couch, and he would bring his leg braces over and knew that Sawyer had to have those to be able to get up and walk. And I'm just like, the amount of care and simple things that give me faith are amazing. I know that Hawkins is protective of Sawyer, and he wants to push him in his wheelchair. And, you know, I can remember some kids were at our house kind of wrestling, and they were getting too rough with Sawyer. And Hawkins, I mean, he was still in a diaper, and he couldn't talk much. And he came around that corner, buddy, and he was like, no, 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 no. And so I'm like, well, at least I know they've got each other's backs. But Hawkins is a fierce protector. And honestly, things that keep me going is just looking back on our story, and things that just didn't make sense at the time make sense now. And, you know, I had always told Taylor, after seeing kids that I took care of, if we ever had a child with a genetic, some sort of something, I don't want to ever take that risk to have another child, you know, and run the risk of having another child with some sort of disease. And that was just something, an agreement we made. And so had we known all of this when Sawyer was born, we wouldn't have Hawkins. And even then, I had 2 high-risk pregnancies, and I had cancer risk for myself, and they cautioned me, like, you really don't need to have more kids. And so we were, after Hawkins, we were planning on being done. But, I mean, he was almost 2 by the time Sawyer had a diagnosis. And I'm like, you know, had we not had all this done and thoughts of already not having children, we would have had another child with the possibility of having TFP. And I'm just like, what are at the time, it didn't make sense why I had all these things for me and my health personally, but now it does. Like, the Lord protected us, and Hawkins is our own little miracle, because we wouldn't have him, and what a joy he is to our life. And so there's not a way when I'm down and sad, I just can't put myself there. And not that I don't go there, and it's hard talking about it, especially with the race. I have to talk, and I don't mind to talk about it in a day-to-day life, like, that's fine, but it can become encompassing. So I fully feel from the Psalms, I cry out to the Lord, because there have been so many times that's what I do. And it was a morning I was driving to Vanderbilt for a checkup, and it was just one of those times where it just hit me, and I was sobbing the whole way down there and asking the Lord why. And so I get there, and the little nurse tech, I'd never seen her before, and she's taking my vital signs, and she turns around, and her T-shirt says "Faith over fear." And I was just like, it was again one of those times that the Lord just smacked me in the face, like, being like, I got it, just keep on keeping on, you know. And that's just, there's so many times I repeat that to myself over and over again, like, faith over fear, because there's a lot of fear. Mm-hmm. And I can do, you know, being a nurse and managing his medicine and regimens and schedules and all the things we have to do, like I can do everything right and perfect, and it still might not be enough. And so that's the hard part, is knowing I have no control over this at all.
Yeah.
And which it just shows like how much no one has control over anything.
Mm-hmm.
But that has become my mantra, because I live in fear, and stifling that every day is so hard, and trying to convince myself to have faith even when I'm not feeling it.
Yeah. You also mentioned in there something about receiving counseling and therapy. At what point in the journey did you begin looking toward that? Has that been something that's been a part of your life for a while? Have you consistently seen a therapist, or was that something that came about after Sawyer's diagnosis and this journey as a family? When did that come about, and then how has that proven to be really helpful and beneficial for you?
I've always gone to counseling, probably since I was a teenager, and off and on through the years. And I had already set up with a counselor here, and I've always made a point to have a Christian counselor, because I felt like there were so many different ways that they could point you, and that was just different than others. And it was actually, being here was my first time having a male counselor, and I wasn't sure how I was going to like it. And he has just been amazed. I've been amazed by his knowledge of the scripture and his ability to just quote passages. And there's so many times where I'm shocked. I think that's something I've always been amazed by with therapy, is when I go in and things that I thought were bothering me, I just start talking, and what I thought was bothering me is not at all what's coming out for this hour-long session, and sometimes I go in there and we both have dogs, and we talk about our dogs the whole time, but then that can lead us to something else that we, are talking to, and so it's very nice to be kind of reined back in by an unbiased Christian opinion and help to just like remember, solidify this, and he was one that helped me, see to do different exercises, and one thing he was like, write it all out to the Lord. All you want to do, write it all out. And I did, and write out your prayer and write out what you're upset about. And then when I wrote all this out, he was like, and I want you to light it on fire. And so here I am on my back deck, at like 1 a.m. and with my chili pot and lighting something on fire. And Taylor's like, I hope you don't burn down the house out there. But it was just, as it went up, the smoke and kind of the ashes, like I was just like, Lord, I understand like why that was such a visual, because I felt like it was raising up to him. And not that I don't pray to him, but it was just such a visual of like that being from me on earth going up to the sky. And it just, I love our back porch. I love where our trampoline is, because we can see a bunch of stars, and the moon always shines on that side of the house. And so the boys and I do lay out on the trampoline a lot, but it's just this beautiful, pure night. And it was just solidifying that he's like, I'm hearing you. I've got it, and I have appreciated the exercises that he's helped me work through, and just listening and, comforting me almost in a dad way, like, the Lord, you are his child. Like, he understands. He's not going to stop loving you. Yeah. You can be mad at him. You can be upset, and you can not understand why. He's like, but he's there, and he can handle it. Just like you can handle it with your children.
Yeah. Wow. It's so interesting to hear because I know it doesn't seem like this is as common now, but I know that for a while there's just been a lot of skepticism about counseling and therapy from some like Christian circles, and then sometimes it's also just a like a personal reservation that people may have about seeking help in that way. You know, I think sometimes people wrestle with the idea that I just need to pray to God and He'll take it away. Like it's just because I'm not being spiritual enough, or I don't have enough faith. And it's like, no, like God has given us resources, and I do think your point is so important that as much as we can, seeking out help from a Christian perspective is definitely the way to go. But I think sometimes people can be leery or hesitant, maybe not necessarily about other people doing it, but have these reservations themselves that they should just be able to pray and it go away. And I think that's so important to realize that we do need that outside help. And it sounds like for you that has been so helpful. And it's interesting hearing about some of the practices that he's taught or given or prescribed. I think it's interesting how we tend to make spiritual disciplines such a immaterial thing, where it's like it's just something that goes on in our brains, right? Like it's all cognitive. I just, shoot up this prayer in my mind and it goes somewhere. But we are embodied beings, and our physicality matters. And I think it matters in terms of prayer too. And so having this like visual connection, it's not just a mind trick. It's like this really does do something. It really does help to see and visualize. I think that's why, like in the Old Testament, you had so many visual things that were associated with what God instructed the Israelites to do. And I think sometimes we kind of miss out on that in modern Christianity. And so practices like that sounds so helpful. And I've tried to start doing some things like that. I haven't tried burning the vomit journaling where you just write out all your.
You need to borrow my chili pot.
yeah, but things like that I think are so helpful. So I know that was a bit tangential, but I think that's really interesting to hear and really encouraging and insightful.
Well, the mind is so powerful, and that's what it initially started is you can let stuff build up in your mind, and there's stuff that you're just predispositioned to be, and God didn't mess up. He didn't screw you up. Like you're not a whoopsie. And it was kind of like somebody explained it to me, like you have a cup, and sometimes you can't help all these things that have happened to you, and sometimes your cup just overflows, and you've got to let it out somewhere. How do you let it out? And some people can do that within working out, or just to keep that cup. Maybe your cup stays full, and not that it ever goes empty, but at least that's where therapy has helped kind of swipe that overflowing out. And like you said, I was just sitting here thinking like all the times that Jesus used visuals, walking on the water, or making sure after, on the cross he ate, and people were like, oh, like he's, like
he's a real human.
He's a real human. Like he didn't have to do that. Like, but he made the visual. And there's so much that with the way our brain works, and I can kind of geek out on it because I love psychiatric nursing and stuff. But
go ahead.
There's just so much, like, especially I read this book called The Body Keeps the Score. And you don't realize how much your brain can change, or how much physical things can come about from stress, and your body will start, breaking down and having these issues that you can't control, but you're having them.
Yeah.
And so it's just like a lot of times in pediatrics, children having stomach issues. It might not be a stomach issue. It could very well be, most likely, anxiety. And, a lot of things play out in the GI tract that are actually psychological things that are going on, especially in kids. So it's just very, you can have the guilt, the false guilt. That's been another thing that my therapist has really helped me see is, it's like you said, there is that mentality of, oh, you just need to pray more, or your faith isn't strong and that's why you have to go, or you're weak. And actually, I think it's very, very strong to go and let yourself be vulnerable. And, and it does say, I can't remember the passage, like, cast your burdens on each other. And like, okay, the whole point is us being broken people, and so there's such a strength in relying on others for help, which is also circle back around to smack me upside the head when I'm stressing over people helping me with Sawyer stuff.
Yeah. Well, what you were saying there, it reminded me, I think the passage that you were talking about is, I think it's 1 Peter 5:12, cast all your anxieties on him, for he cares for you.
Yes.
The passage that I was thinking of is when Paul prays for the Ephesians, and he says in verse 14, he says, for this reason I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named, that according to the riches of his glory he may grant you to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may have the strength to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. And then he says, now to him who's able to do far more abundantly beyond all we ask or think, according to the power that's at work within us, to him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen. It's like the thing that strengthens our inner being is to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge. Like, what is the thing that sustains us? What is the thing that brings life and healing? What is the thing that gives us strength that is so different and maybe even strange from the world's point of view? It's knowing the love of Christ in a way that fills us with the fullness of God. And that happens, I think, often through these like spiritual exercises. And what is also interesting about that to me is so much of what I hear from Christian counseling is drawing modern day Christians back to the ancient path.
Yeah.
It's like, this is what Christians did throughout the centuries. Like, it's very well documented how the early Christians practiced many of these spiritual disciplines in very like embodied ways. And so a lot of it is just like it's not for people who are lacking in faith or anything like that. It's like, no, this is just going back to the way that we were always meant to be sustained and filled by the Lord. And in modern Christianity, we've just kind of forgot that. We've lost our use of those spiritual practices, and we don't even know how to get back into them. Like, if it was at one point like riding a bicycle for ancient Christians, it was just part of what they did. Now the modern church at large has just kind of forgotten how to ride that bike, and we need those tools and disciplines again. And so that's really interesting to hear about, like just from your perspective on all of that and how helpful that's been. Anything else on like the counseling aspect of it and the ways that that's been helpful?
I guess just like encourage people that it's not wrong, and to make sure who you reach out to, be careful of who you get counseled with. And, and there can be preconceived notions and preconceived ideas. And so just trying to figure it out through a lot of thought and prayer, what you feel like. And sometimes, I mean, for me, every time it's kind of been, usually I've had a better experience with somebody who didn't know me from the get-go. And I could tell my story to, and they could look at my life as what I've brought to you and not, oh, well, I saw you over here, and kind of have these already preconceived, which is great that you can get counsel from people, I'm not saying that, but when it comes to something that like you're really struggling with, I would encourage you to find someone trustworthy. And like you said, just bringing you back to the basics. I think something that is always, when people are like, oh, you just need to pray more, kind of maybe going a different way is, I think we all get stuck in wanting to do these elaborate prayers. And, we have to pray so long to ask for different things. And, I can only ask God so many times in one prayer, like, please help cure my kid. Please help his day. Please comfort him in pain, and, or let your will be done or whatever I'm praying on. But, we're told to pray without ceasing. And, I have a friend who recently said, you remind me of Mary when she talks about Jesus, and she stored those things up in her heart. And I, because I was telling her, I said, something simple of him like going upstairs or leaping off of a step is such a miracle for him, where he used to not be even able to go anywhere without leg braces, and it's like these little things all through the day, that I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord, for that little joy, or thank you. And the amount of times I tear up and that I just say thank you for that. And, or he falls, or it's like brought up in, his deficits are brought up and it's obvious. And I'm just like, Lord, please, please help us, please help him. And so it's it's not wrong to just have these little prayers throughout the day, because that's how I feel like. I don't feel like I have the time. Well, not that I don't have the time. I didn't mean it that way. I meant like there's not a lot of times that I do sit down and just have elaborate prayers. It's like I feel like I have a running conversation with the Lord all day long, and instead of these times, and maybe that's not the right way to do it, but I feel like I do just continuously pray to him, rather than having these sit down moments. And on the subject of praying and anxiety, sorry, but I can't pray at nighttime before I go to bed because it upsets me. And for, things that I struggle with, then I don't sleep well, or then I'm thinking about it and I can't go to sleep, and that's something with like just, psychologically with the brain, I pray not kind of at the classic times that you think about praying, and I don't think there's anything you can be not saying I'm like great Christian over here, but there's not one way to pray, or there's not one way to be a Christian. There's not one way to get over things. God is meeting you where you are, and he knows you and your heart.
Yeah. I like the way I heard someone put it one time, that it's not necessarily about making time for God as much as it is about bringing God into our time. Or maybe another way of putting it is like becoming aware of God's presence in our time. And that sounds like that's kind of what you've been doing, where it's noticing all of the little hints of
Yeah.
God's presence, that it's like, I'm right here, and then thanking God for those moments, and becoming more and more aware of his presence and his nearness with you, that it doesn't have to be making time for God with this long, elaborate prayer,
Right.
but that he's near and that he's with you, and that those moments can come frequently to sustain you to the next one and the next one and the next one, and creating an awareness of like, God is with me in this. And that leads to kind of one other question that I was curious about. You mentioned before how, like, throughout this journey, one of the questions, or one of the things that the conclusions, I guess, you've come to is like, how could anyone not believe that there is a God?
Right.
And so you were just talking about, how through prayer and these different practices of prayer and these spiritual disciplines, that it's helped you become more and more aware of God's nearness and his involvement in your life and in this world. What has led you to that conclusion, where so many people in your situation would say, I don't see how there could be a God in the midst of what I'm going through? How could he let all of this happen? There's no way that there could be a good God who would allow all of this. And yet you've kind of come to the exact opposite conclusion, not without challenge and difficulty and frustration and doubt, but through it, you've still hung on to this like resilient conclusion, that no, how could there not be a God? So kind of explain like just the rationale behind that. I know in some ways it's like, that's the point. It doesn't exactly make sense,
Right.
but talk about just how you've come to that resolve.
I think I'm not going to lie, like it's questioned, some people will be like, oh, I've never questioned God. And I'm like, that's really great. Like, I'm glad you've had that where you've never experienced something that has made you have that in your faith is amazing. But I mean, I'm imperfect, and I absolutely have questioned like why, and things that I've seen being a pediatric nurse, like what in the world, and I don't know why, but the bad things happen, and I hate that they do. And I know it's just where sin was brought into this world, and there's so much that my brain can go down rabbit trails and reeling, and it's like, okay, I can do that, and I can just be bitter and not have hope, and not the option, kind of like I think I said earlier, was to suffocate in the floor all day, be negative, be bitter, and how is that going to play around to my kids and being a mom, and how's that an example going to be for them? Kids will humble you and really make you think differently about things, but there's, I think, and the options don't look too great for the bad side. Having the doubt, I have it. I have doubts, but I can either live in that negativity, or I can choose to see God. And it's kind of like when people say, or they're like, oh, I'm interested in a white truck. Well, then now you're going to see every white truck there is out there, and whereas you might not have seen that before. Like, it is a absolute choice to see, or try to see, or even just the simple things, and realize that's the Lord, and I don't, and in having my doubts, it's like I said earlier, that it's almost comical. Some of the things that just don't make sense, like that should not happen. Sawyer's life he should be dead. Like the doctors literally look at him and they're like astounded. They're his doctor said something the other day about something I asked her, and she said, well, I wouldn't doubt it because he defies all the odds. Like the odds are against him and he's denying it and knocking them down. And it's not something I did. There's got to be something else working here. And I know what the scripture says. I know what Jesus did and said and what he can do. And I don't understand why he doesn't move a mountain and just snap his fingers and say he's cured, and as much as I want him to do that. But what I've realized with different things that I've experienced in life is sometimes you can pray for something and God will answer it in the most unconventional way that you never thought to even think that that's how he was going to answer the prayer.
Yeah.
And there's times you don't even know why. I don't know why my kid was given this disease, but I'm sure going to fight to try and save him and get him a cure while I can. And like I said, I don't know how people can go through something like this and not have the comfort. And I hate for someone to go through this and not have that comfort. Because I know how much pain that I constantly feel, and I can't imagine that pain without the comfort of the Lord encouraging me and me seeing the little snippets that he puts in our lives and blesses us with. And it's our hardships I feel like Job. And my friend was like, you know what? Maybe you were just supposed to be a Job and you never understand. And I don't understand, but I know with the knowledge I have today, with the knowledge of the scripture and the love that God can look at my heart and know I don't understand, but I'm sure I'm going to try my best to serve him and through my doubts, trust in him. And because I know he knows my heart and he knows how to meet me where I'm at. And if I go through this life and I've gotten it wrong and, there is no God, like what in the world? At least I've lived my life positive with hope. Or I could go ahead and say there's no God or there's no anything and I can live a miserable life. And so the options, even, I guess, just kind of looking down the middle of it, looks pretty good to be a believer in God versus not, and that it's the more positive way and helps you survive. I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have him.
Yeah. I know Lawrence has said to me before, and I'm sure he shared this with others, but how he's never seen someone's life get better by encountering a trial and deciding to walk away from God.
Right.
That doesn't give every answer.
No.
And that doesn't make Christianity empirically true, objectively true, but experientially, I think it is true to say, how do you get through these times without that? And I thought it was interesting how you talked about kind of what we focus on and what we give attention to, and how that shapes us and how we see the world. Like if we see the bad, if we choose to focus on everything that's going wrong, that's quickly what our world is going to become, and that's all we're going to be able to see. But the same is true in the opposite direction. And that's, I think, exactly Jesus' point in Matthew 6 when he talks about, don't be anxious or worried about anything, about what you're going to eat or drink or what you're going to wear. Or you could, make a whole list of things that people worry about beyond those things, many of which are very valid fears, like where's the next meal going to come from? Or how are we going to get through this as a family? But then he pivots and he starts talking about, like, look at this. Look at this. Look at the birds of the air. Look at the lilies of the field. Look at how God is actually working and taking care of his creation, and how much more infinitely valuable are you.
Right.
And it's like that it almost feels like, I don't know, Jedi-like of Jesus to be like, just, look, let me give you this tool. Let me give you this trick. It's
right.
Like, trick's not the right way of putting it, but it's like, oh, wow, like that is how it works. That is how we function as humans. That's the way God has made us. And that's amazing to hear how that's been true in your situation, like how God has been able to point you to, maybe it's not look at the birds or look at the lilies, but look at this and that and this. And you've been able to kind of absorb those moments and store those in your heart, treasure those in your heart. Mm-hmm. And that sounds like been so life-giving for you. So that's really, really cool to hear.
It takes an active choice. Yeah. You know, there's some days I'm just like, nope, there's no way there can be a God. And it's like immediately I feel guilt, or I can go down that rabbit hole. And that's the thing, is it's not black and white. There's not one person that has got this Christianity thing figured out. And I think especially when your personality is black and white, you can't live in the gray. And there's a lot of gray. Yeah. There's a lot we don't know. And so I think that's where people get hung up is, and especially me growing up, like my mom always said, I was the kid, but why? But why? But why? You know, and everything, but why? And Sawyer's definitely a but why. He got that honest. But there's so much that I've just had to resolve within myself to say, I'm not going to know the why, but this is what I've been given, and this is what I see, and these are my two options, and I'm choosing to have faith. Yeah. I could choose the other, but even when I'm doubting, I'm choosing to have faith. And I may have a bad attitude, and when I stand before the Lord one day, he may, say something different, but he knows my heart, and he knows what we go through and where I need to be met. And it's an active, constant choice to choose him.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's easier, and sometimes it's not. When you have the questions in the middle of the night, your mind is spiraling. But there's a lot of times where I'm just saying, I'm sorry, Lord, I don't know.
Yeah.
But my option is to serve you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we kind of bring the conversation to a close, first of all, is there anything else that you want to share just kind of about this whole journey as a family? And then also, what's the most recent update? I know just the other day, there was an appointment in Pittsburgh, and so that's kind of the most recent update there. But yeah, just free range on all of that.
Well, just you sitting here talking and different things you're saying, there's so much that Sawyer encompasses, and that it's like a friend told us when he was diagnosed, Sawyer is not done showing the world Jesus. And he's Mr. Positive Susie. Like, he just, I'll be like, man, that car almost hit us, and driving. He's like, well, Mama, maybe they were just having a bad day, or they sneezed. And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah. There's just so much that he sees the joy in. And we were asked, what is a word that describes Sawyer? And it is joy. I mean, there's been so much that he has gone through that no child should ever go through. He's been poked and prodded, and all along he's just continue to do what we've asked him to do. And even when he didn't understand, he had faith in us, and his little example within that he did it with a good attitude, and it's uncomfortable and it hurts, but he knows it's going to make him feel better. And so there's just so much that he has taught me through all of his hardships. And it's just, I'm amazed, which, I'm a proud mama. I'm amazed by both my kids, and just things they teach you constantly. But Sawyer's mentality through everything has just been so, any other personality, and it could be a completely different life for him. And he just owns it. And if, people who haven't followed along with us, Sawyer has trifunctional protein deficiency, and basically his body doesn't have the ability to break down fats for energy. So instead of that, his body eats his muscles, and so it leads to neuropathy and cardiomyopathy, and then retinopathy, blindness. And so your heart being a muscle, so we have to keep his reserves up, and he can very quickly go into his body eating itself. So when he starts showing weakness, his body's starting to eat himself. He has a risk of overexerting himself and having a heart attack, because that's what his body will do, is start breaking down any muscles it can find, and the heart's a pretty strong muscle, and so after he was diagnosed, I just, y'all, I don't even think I thought of fundraising or helping, and it's just kind of grown. Y'all came to us, and it was like, oh, okay, like that would be really helpful. And then it just, like, the outpouring of strangers and people that we don't even know, would just give these generous donations. And so now here we have been able, the doctors in Pittsburgh are like, I never knew I would know what Bowling Green, Kentucky is, but buddy, they do now. And they know our church family is our biggest support. And I think that just attests to we're part of God's family, and everyone here and strangers have shown us Jesus' love and treated us as family. And so the most recent update with him is our funding from last year. There were a few big ones. There's a medicine. Sawyer deals with neuropathy, and just him, he can't feel his hands and feet very well. And so something simple that just shows how he's just overcome. We couldn't figure out, he goes to kindergarten, we couldn't figure out which hand he wants to write with. Well, I said, buddy, is there one that feels better? And he said, well, when one gets tired, I just switch to one. When that one gets tired, I just switch back to the other one. And we were like, well, okay, sounds good. So he writes with both hands.
Wow.
And there's just so much that he has figured out on his own. And so neuropathy is one of his big things. And currently there's no treatment to help with that. And so the medicine that they're working on, they're moving to clinical trials with it, which is really exciting because that would be something really, really helpful for Sawyer. Last year they had to do a skin biopsy. It was really painful for Sawyer. And when they got his genetic report or cells and fibroblast, his cells align very, very closely to the mice that are in the mice trials. Very, very similar. So any research or things that they are using with Sawyer's cells or with these mice, Sawyer's most likely going to react with, the same way these mice are. And everything this doctor's doing right now, it's succeeding in the mice trial. So the future is so, so hopeful. We're just not there yet. And another thing is a device that could help us know, like a glucometer with just a finger prick that would show us if Sawyer's body was releasing the enzyme it does to break down muscles. And so currently, if he throws up more than once, we have to dash to the ER. And so we keep emergency bags packed, ready to go at any point because his body can break down. When these kids start looking sick, their body's already breaking down. And so that's the scary part, is how quickly he could decompensate. And but this device would be able to show us that, oh, we have a little bit more time. His body's not breaking down just yet. We don't have to be gone within 30 minutes out of the house, which we've done it. We've done the emergency run. In fact, I think one night we were hosting a Devo, and he got sick right before, and we had to go, and y'all were just great. We were like, all right, eat your dinner, enjoy, we're going to the hospital. And, that's really exciting that, the biggest thing is they have, gene replacement therapy, which would cure it, and they have identified it has to be a virus that's the carrier that gets the new genes into the body. So essentially, they have been able to identify that through our funding of the research, and he was just thrilled. And the doctors he's very much like, in the next 5 to 10 years, this is going to look a lot different. And when we were first diagnosed, it was in 10 to 15 years, this could look a lot different. And now he's saying this is going to look a lot different. And it's because of what we have raised, because all extra funding for research has gone to COVID research. And so that's what the government's pushing, is COVID research and this and that. And so we get poo-pooed to the side. So honestly, it's just, if you want to help something and that you want your money to go to something great, like, absolutely reach out to us, because we keep a running deposit going to Pittsburgh for this doctor's research, and the ability that we have been able to do with our funds is so encouraging and uplifting, especially after this last appointment, because so much headway was made this last year. And it's kind of what I was getting real stressed with this race and tired and run down, and I just thought, Lord, here we go, another little pick me up. Like, this is why you're doing this, Katie, is to keep getting big news like this. And so they were very encouraged with how Sawyer's body is. And so we're just thankful there for what he has. He is doing so very well, and we're just so very thankful for that. And I know that's the Lord.
Yeah.
And
Wow. That's amazing. I have kind of been following, the Facebook like updates and tracking, and getting, some of the more detailed information there. But hearing that breakdown of it was really helpful, and that's just awesome that all of that has come together in these past couple years.
Yeah.
And how much the fundraising has immediately affected all of that. Wow. So before we close, there's one story that I've been thinking about just through this whole conversation. And it kind of relates in some ways to the question of why, why does God allow things like this? And the truth is, like we've been saying, there's almost never a clear answer. And just because there's not a clear answer doesn't mean that there's not one, that God doesn't have a good reason.
Right.
But in this story, there is a reason given. It doesn't satisfy everything. It doesn't get rid of all of our questions. But when you were talking about Sawyer, I could not help but think of this and how true it is for him, how true it is of him. And it's when in John 9, Jesus heals the man born blind, but these people come to him, his disciples ask, Rabbi, why has this happened? Why is this man born blind? And they have their own reasons. Right. They have their own speculation. But his response is so powerful. He says, It is that the works of God might be displayed in him. And when I think about this whole journey that y'all have been on as a family and everything that he has embodied as this young boy in his life and his joy in this strength that comes only from the Lord and all of the people that he's impacted, I can't help but be convinced that at least part of the reason is that the works of God might be displayed in him, and they certainly are. So.
Thank you. I hadn't thought about that. I'm going to go home and underline that in my Bible.
Well, Katie, thanks so much for joining today, for sharing this story, this journey that you've been on as a family. And just like I shared earlier, that prayer in Colossians 1, everyone is praying that over y'all right now. From the moment we heard, we've not ceased to pray that God will strengthen y'all and give y'all joy, and you know that he's surrounded you with this army of friends and family. Yes. And I am very, very grateful for who y'all are and the ways that y'all have been so encouraging, even when y'all have needed the encouragement yourself. So, well,
I'm honored that you even asked, and I don't feel like we're anything special, but because the best medicine we can have is prayers, and that's what gets us through. And when you have a something tragic happen or some big event in your life, people are it's the beginning that people are like, what do you need? What can I think I asked one person for toothpaste. I was like, I need toothpaste today. And they brought it to our house. But it's the constant, the people that stick with you that are like, I'm still praying. I pray for you every day. And the amount of people that text me that or say that, or, you asking me to do this and saying all the kind things you say, that's what gets us through. So I appreciate it.
Of course. Well, we're looking forward to the race coming up here in just a couple weeks. Still some preparation to go for that. But yes. Again, if you haven't signed up, it really does make a difference. And
every little bit counts.
Yeah. And it's a lot of fun too.
Yes.
So, yeah. But again, thanks, Katie. Appreciate y'all so much.